Amruta Marwah. It's a simple original introduction. It is truly a joy and an honor to welcome our guest speaker today, Amruta Marwah. Amruta's journey is a beautiful reflection of curiosity, compassion, and a lifelong love for learning. With a strong academic foundation in microbiology and public health, she has contributed significantly as a researcher at the University of Minnesota and the Minnesota Department of Health. Through her work, she has been part of efforts that directly impact the health and well-being of communities. Alongside her research career, Amruta spent nearly a decade teaching at the graduate level, guiding students through fields such as microbiology, health communications, public health, and critical thinking. Her passion for education and mentorship has clearly been a defining thread throughout her professional life. Yet sometimes the most meaningful paths are the ones that gently find us. After the pandemic, the pull toward education became stronger than the pull toward research. Through her daughter's school, Amruta discovered the beautiful and unique world of special education. Like many of us who pursued our early education in India, this field was not something she had been widely exposed to before. But the lifelong learner within her embraced the opportunity to begin a new journey. Today, she is in her 4th year in special education, bringing with her not only a rich background in research and teaching, but also a deep sense of empathy, curiosity, and commitment to understanding every learner. This evening, Amruta will share her insights on a topic that is both powerful and necessary: building safe spaces where special minds feel seen and special hearts feel safe. Creating spaces where every child feels valued, understood, and secure is at the heart of true education, and it takes thoughtful educators to lead this change. We are truly fortunate to have someone like Amruta Marwah with us today to guide this conversation and share her experience with our community. Thank you, Amruta.
Thank you, Reti, and thank you, Tamil Sangam. The only comment I know is wonderful, so I'll start with that. Because other than that, especially coming after all the speakers who were talking, especially after coming after all the speakers who spoke in Tamil, the only Tamil word I can use is wonderful. So as Reti mentioned, my family has been a family of educators, so I have seen how teaching can closely affect not only the students but also the educator. I think that's where I imbibe the true joy of learning. So I've tried to continue that, and when I entered into this field of special education, I found this new field where I hadn't been exposed to earlier, but I found so much contentment and fulfillment in this profession. And when they reached out for today's occasion, I thought if this is helpful for anybody, I would love to. So thank you for inviting me. This is a prayer in Sanskrit. When we were growing up, we would say this a lot. Karagre vasate Lakshmi, Karamadhye Saraswati, Karamule tu Govindam, Prabhate Karadarshani. All it means is different parts of our hand. So at the tips of our hand is where Lakshmi resides. At the center of our hand is where Saraswati resides. At the base is where Govindam resides. But when we put all our hands together, that's when we make ourselves powerful with our actions. Even when I was growing up, even though I was reciting this, I don't think I ever understood the meaning of it until I started stepping into special education. When I stepped into special education, I realized that just like our hand, like our fingers are not evenly spaced, that's how different everybody's minds are. But when we put all minds together, that's how we create a society that is embracing and it's powerful in its own way. So I try to remember that this prayer is my guiding light. We are not going to talk about the brain. The only reason I put this image is just to show that the brain is so intricate and complex. If you see, there are at least 14 to 15 different areas of the brain that control how we process the environment around us, how we process our emotions. And the only reason I put this up is because if there are so many different areas of the brain, how is it possible that every brain is similar to each other? Every person processes things in different ways. That is why there are some people who have a stronger sense of smell, some people who have a very strong sense of touch. because each of us, it activates our brain areas in different ways, and that is where the neurodiversity comes in. So I wanted to focus on these terms, neurotypical versus neurodivergent, because a lot of times when people are trying to talk, we refer to the term normal and not, which can be hurtful because in nature there is nothing called as normal. It would be better if we use the terms neurotypical versus neurodivergent. This term was first coined by Australian sociologists to recognize that everyone's brain develops in a unique way. So going back to the previous slide, if our brain has so many different portions in the brain, different parts, it is not possible that any two brains will work the exact same way. So instead of using the word normal, it is better to use the words neurotypical versus neurodiverse. Neurotypical would be where most of the population fits into that bracket. Right? Neurodivergent is where the differences in their brain are so high that they stand out in the crowd. But there is no way that we can call the neurotypical people as normal and the neurodivergent as abnormal. So whenever we refer, I think that's the biggest takeaway I would want all of you to remember from this, that instead of using the words normal and abnormal, we would like to use neurotypical and neurodivergent. Sorry, going back to the previous slide. I just want to focus on the bottom part, and all traits are human traits. So there is nothing normal, there is nothing abnormal. Again, we are not going to go through all this list, but the reason I put this visual up here is because if you see the biggest bell curve, that is where the average, most of the people lie. But if you see on the other two ends, that is where the neurodiverse people would be, because their brains don't function exactly the way as the average brain functions. But again, that doesn't mean that there is a deficit or that's not normal. It just means that their brain works differently than most people's brain. And the list of disorders placed on the left, it just shows that if there are so many different ways that brains can work differently. So that is why we should focus on how the brain function. Focus more on the brain function rather than thinking about normal and abnormal. Next slide, please. So coming to neurodivergence and special education, because this is a field, I think, especially in the Indian community, especially if we have grown up in India, we were not exposed and we were not aware to special education and special needs as much. So this is a field that I think, especially in the Indian community, we need to talk more about and get some awareness. Okay. There is still a taboo around special education and special needs. So a lot of families, they still feel like if we share about our special needs child or our own special needs, we feel like we might be isolated in the community. But the reason we are talking about special education is that there are resources out there that can help your brain function better. If your brain is not functioning the way the average brain functions, there isn't a problem. It just means that the society is not made for the brains to function differently. So there isn't a problem with the brain, there is a problem with the way society perceives it. So that is why the accommodation of special education was introduced, so that the society can be more accepting and society can accommodate all types of diverse brains and diverse functions. So I will not go into the details of this, but this is just to inform people that there are laws, especially in this country, where everybody should be able to, all students should be able to access education in the same way, whether their brain is functioning in the average way or their brain functions in a neurodivergent way. So just looking at this, again, the disability categories by federal law, there are at least 13 disability categories in which a student can fall, and if they fall in any of those categories, they are legally, schools are legally required to provide education to them, which is free. So you shouldn't have to pay extra money for that. The education should be free, and it should be in the least restrictive environment, which means that the students should be, most times they should be in the regular class. Only if their needs are so high that they need to be removed from the class, that's where they will get special instruction. But they have a right to public education just like the rest of the students. So that was just, yeah. Next slide, please. Eligibility and evaluation. So a lot of families, especially if we grew up in India, we don't really know how to approach this process, right? So the easiest way I can define this is, I think, thinking of your primary care providers, thinking of your pediatricians. If you start noticing that your child you might start seeing some issues, your pediatrician should be your first point of contact, because they can give you more resources about it. And they can start, the sooner you identify that there might be a difference, the sooner you intervene, in the long run, the better it is for the student. Again, going back to the eligibility criteria, there are two important things for a student to be eligible for special education. First, there should be a medical diagnosis, which can come from the doctor's file. Second, even if you have a medical diagnosis, if it is not such a big diagnosis that it impacts your education, the student might not be eligible. Right? So those two conditions must be fulfilled. Again, this might seem very overwhelming, but when you talk to your pediatrician, they can guide you step by step to what the process can look like. Going to the second part, where the evaluation process is, I don't want to focus too much on it, but the most important part I wanted to focus here is, anybody can refer a child for special education. It could be a parent, it could be your doctor, or teachers that work with your students. If they notice that maybe a student is not being able to speak as fluently as the rest of the students, anybody can always refer. As a parent, you can always ask the school to complete an evaluation. Legally, they have to fulfill your request, and they have to go through the evaluation process. Next slide, please. Focusing on all of those procedures, I know that can be overwhelming, but I think as a community, as a society, what we really need to focus on is neuro-affirmative action. It seems like a fancy and big term. All it means is we should be welcoming of all types of thoughts, all types of brain functions. There are some simple ways we can do this. I think the first one is the most important way. We should normalize diversity. By inviting me here today, by talking about special education, Tamil Sangam has already taken that first step, because we are already talking about it, and the more we talk, the more normalized the situation will be, right? The more you talk about it as a family, as with your kids, the less different they will think that their peers are, right? So the more we normalize it, the better it will be as a community. Celebrate differences, right? So these are some examples of books that I have read with my own students, with my kids. Because when we talk about how different people function and think in different ways, children become more accepting of it. They realize that there is no one right way of thinking. Differences are not good, differences are not bad, different is just different, right? So just the way like we look different, our brains can also function differently. The third one, understanding and discussing the science behind differences. Going back to like the brain image, I like to pull that up a lot, because that just shows that if a brain is so complex, there can never be two brains that can work exactly the same. And that's all there is to it. There is no bad, there is no good to it. Practice empathy and kindness. I think it goes for across the community. Like for everything, if we practice more empathy and kindness, it is helpful to everybody in the society. The biggest one, I think, do not assume that diverse brain function is a deficit. A lot of the times, because of how we have been talking about disabilities and special education, in our minds, we think that if somebody has special education, that means they're less in some way. But that is not true. It just means that they function in different ways. They might have different strengths than us. So thinking of that not as a deficit, but just as a difference is important. Do not isolate. I think that is the biggest, especially for Indian communities and Indian parents. Even other communities have heard this. So parents who have kids with special needs, they can feel isolated very easily. They might feel like they cannot go to social events because of their child. The only way we can make them feel more comfortable is to be more accepting. So when we lead with curiosity, it's okay to be curious about what the situation is. But if we are curious in a positive way, just accepting them and embracing them the way they are, I think it will go a long way for not just the child, but the family. Then just the last one, be an upstander. Especially, this is one that I like to talk about with kids too. If you notice somebody is being discriminated against, or they are not being treated correctly because of their differences, be an upstander. Try to fight for them, try to speak for them. Even a simple question like, can I help you in any way? Are you okay? That goes a long way. Next slide, please. These are some resources. We are not going to walk through all of this, but the reason I put this up here is just to let you know that because of the conversation around special education, there is a lot of awareness. And in Minnesota, there are so many resources which families can obtain, not just for your kids. If you know another family, if you have seen a student, if you see a neighbor, these are resources that you can suggest to them. Right, the bottommost one, I found it really interesting that families, like I said, can feel isolated. There are many sensory friendly events that happen around the city. All you have to do is if you go to the Minnesota Department of Health, that gives you a list of what events are happening. Because like the brain processes things differently, there are some people, some kids that might process sounds differently, and it's hard for them to be in a larger crowd. So for them, these sensory events, and as you notice, they are all across. There are museums, there are theaters, there are zoos. So it's only a matter of going out there and trying to find those resources. I would just like to end with the quote. It's a Sanskrit quote. It says, Sadaiva Saundaryam Pashya. That means we should always try to find the beauty around us. These are all the different works from my students. They're all second, third, and fourth graders. Especially the bottom left one, I could never draw that. That student drew that in 5 minutes and colored it in like 2 minutes. And this is not even like he didn't look at a picture and copy it. This is all from his imagination. So that just shows that they, like, even if you're neurodiverse, you have different strengths that probably I or like the rest of us don't. The top two, another student, she's a fourth grader, she came up with the instructions how to put up the sofa and the piano set. She wrote the instructions, she made the craft all in like 10 minutes. I am an adult, I still can't do that. So that every day I feel blessed to be surrounded by these students and see that there is beauty in so many different ways which we might not identify. Thank you.